Have you felt it lately? That silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but heavy. The kind of stillness that makes you hear things. Memories echoes, questions you didn't ask. If you're here tonight, maybe it's not just for horror. Maybe it's for answers. Or at least the feeling that someone else has been there too. Tonight, we're not just entering the woods, we're entering what people leave behind in them. The American wilderness is vast, beautiful, and brutal. But what makes it truly terrifying isn't what you see, it's what you remember. These stories aren't just about what happened. They're about what lingers, about choices, people made places they crossed into, and moments they thought were over, until the forest told them otherwise. You'll hear about cabins that never fully shut their doors, about trails that loop, even when you walk straight, about voices that wait for yours to answer. Nothing here is told for shock. Every story carries weight, not just fear, but grief, guilt, and the subtle ways we bend under the things we never said out loud. Some of the people you'll meet didn't deserve what found them. Others opened a door they refused to close. So if you're listening tonight, don't just expect screams. Expect reflection, expect stillness, and maybe expect something that sounds a little too familiar. Wherever you are right now, I'm glad you made it here. Let's begin tonight's stories, shall we? Story 1, The Reflection Pool. In Devil's Den. I wasn't looking to find anything. That day I went to Devil's Den State Park because it was quiet, and because I didn't want to be around anyone who might remember my name. Arkansas in late October has this way of swallowing sound like the leaves themselves are tired of listening. I brought a small pack, a notebook I hadn't written in for 6 years, and a camera. I wasn't sure it still worked. I told myself it was just a day hike, that I wouldn't stay long, that maybe being surrounded by something older than me would settle whatever had been gnawing at my thoughts for the past few months. But I wasn't alone in those woods, even if I didn't see another person. The trail I took wasn't on the official park map. It branched off just beyond the Devil's Racetrack, dipping low into a shaded ravine, then curling into what felt like a hollow bowl between cliffs. The further I went, the less I heard birds. There was no wind. Not even my footsteps made sound by the time I reached the clearing, and at the center of it, perfectly still, was a pool. Not a pond, not a creek, just a pool, maybe 20 feet across, ringed by stones and dead leaves black as obsidian. What stopped me wasn't the water itself, but what I saw in it. It was me, but not me now. The reflection staring back was younger, maybe 10 years. No stubble, different haircut, wearing a t-shirt I knew I hadn't owned since college. He blinked before I did. That part I remember with certainty. I backed up, heart slamming against my ribs, and the reflection vanished. The pool rippled once and went still again. I should have turned back. I should have walked out, filed it under weird stuff, and gone home. But something about that place, it didn't feel threatening. It felt expectant. Like I'd finally arrived somewhere I was always supposed to return to. The second time I looked, the reflection showed me standing on a different trail near a wooden bridge. I didn't recognize. I wasn't alone in the image. There was a woman next to me, holding my hand, smiling. Her face was blurry, like my memory refused to finish rendering her, but I felt a surge of something warm in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in years. Grief flared up immediately after. I sat down, knees weak, the cold biting through my jeans. When I blinked again, the image was gone. My own reflection returned. Older, tired, uncertain. That night, I camped in the clearing. I don't know why I hadn't brought more than a thermal blanket and a granola bar. but the thought of leaving before understanding what I saw was unbearable. At some point, I must have fallen asleep beside the pool, because I woke up with my head resting against a flat stone and the sky gray with dawn. My camera was gone. In its place was a notebook. My notebook, open to a page written in my own handwriting, dated 6 years prior. The entry described a hike through Devil's Den, an encounter with a woman named Marla, and a promise to return. I don't remember writing it. I didn't know a Marla. I followed the only trail leading deeper. It wasn't on any park map, and the markers were carved into the trees themselves. Little symbols like eyes or spirals. The forest felt different now. Not hostile, but aware. I found the bridge I'd seen in the reflection. I stood in the same spot, waiting for the warmth to return. It didn't. Just cold air and silence. But someone had been here. Fresh footprints. A campfire long dead. A necklace tied to a branch. I recognized it. It used to belong to my sister. She died when I was 16. When I looked into the pool that night, I saw my father. He'd been gone nearly a decade, but there he was, laughing younger than I'd ever known him. The images came faster after that. Faces I'd buried, moments I thought forgotten. My mother's hands as she braided my hair when I was small. The hospital bed where I sat with my uncle the night before. He passed Marla again. Closer this time. No blur. She was real. I knew her. My chest ached with the weight of knowing and not knowing at once. I stayed 3 nights. I stopped eating. I stopped leaving the clearing. I drank water from the pool. It was cold, but didn't taste like anything. I stopped dreaming. I stopped writing. I stopped being sure of what day it was. On the 4th night, I looked into the pool and saw someone else looking back. Not me. Not someone I'd ever been. He smiled and said my name. The water didn't ripple when he spoke. He told me I'd forgotten too much to go back. That the pool remembers what we bury. That memories are not dead. Things, they are offerings. I screamed. Threw rocks. Tried to leave. The trail twisted. Trees looped back. I passed the same carved eye 3 times. I heard someone humming a song I sang in 2nd grade. My own voice, younger off-key. When I finally made it out, I didn't recognize my car. It was the same make and model, but the color was wrong. The plates didn't match. The trunk had a photo inside me, and Marla and my father all smiling on a hike. Devil's Den. Date marked. In pen, October 17th, 2017. 6 years ago to the day. Back home, no one remembered me missing. My apartment was still in my name, but the photos on the wall were different. My phone had messages from contacts I didn't recognize, conversations I didn't remember having. But my handwriting matched the texts. My voice was in the voicemails. A neighbor greeted me by the wrong name. And when I looked in the mirror, I hesitated. Just for a second. Long enough to wonder if the man staring back had always blinked just a little slower than I did. If you ever hike alone and you find a place that feels like it was waiting for you, leave. If your memories come back too vividly, if the people you've lost suddenly seem too close, don't look again. Don't try to understand. Some memories were forgotten for a reason. Some truths were buried because they couldn't be survived twice. The forest does not forget, and when it chooses to give something back, it often takes something in return. If you've been somewhere that felt too familiar, if you've seen a version of yourself that remembers things you never lived, tell someone, write it down, anchor yourself. Because the longer you wait, the more you'll wonder if this version of you is still the first, or just the latest. The forest is tried on. And if you're hearing this and you remember some places don't want to hurt you. They just want to keep you, and they're very good at making you forget why you ever left. Story 2. The Salt Wind of White Sands. I remember the first time I dreamed of him. He was standing in the middle of the dunes, shirtless and pale eyes hidden behind a blindfold that looked like an old military bandage. He didn't speak. He just turned his head slowly as if he could hear me breathing even from across the windless expanse of white. His hand twitched, then lifted, and one finger pointed. Not at me, but behind me. I woke up before I could turn around. That was 2 days into the trip. My name's Ellie Tran. I was 24 when I went to White Sands National Park with 3 friends, part of a YouTube travel project. We've been trying to get off the ground. Nothing fancy, just eerie landscapes, minimal narration, ambient sound. We called it ghost terrain. The idea was to explore places that didn't feel like they belonged to the world anymore. White Sands was our second shoot. We thought it'd be beautiful. Strange but safe. We were wrong on both counts. It was me, Wes, Cam, and Juno. Wes was the gear guy, always stressed about lens flares and battery levels. Cam did sound and editing. Juno was there, mostly because she hated being left out. We arrived just before dusk and set up camp on the edge of the dunes. No one else was around, just sky and silence. The first night was perfect. Too perfect. There was no wind, no bugs, no rustling. The sand shimmered like bone dust under the moonlight. Wes joked about how time felt frozen. We laughed, but none of us checked our watches. We should have. That night we all dreamed of the same man. None of us said it right away. Not over breakfast, burritos, and instant coffee. But when Juno asked if anyone else had seen a blindfolded guy in their dreams, everything went quiet. Cam nodded first, then me, then Wes. Same posture, same silence, same direction. He pointed. None of us remembered what was behind us. We brushed it off as shared suggestion, something we all maybe glimpsed online or imagined. But that day Cam started acting different. He kept glancing behind him, walking slower. Said his watch had reset itself during the night. Battery full, data gone. Wes joked that maybe the salt wind fried it. That phrase stuck with me. Salt wind. There's no salt in White Sands. It's gypsum, but it tasted like salt. Like memory. Like something dried out and still breathing through the sand. The air had a weight that your body reacted to before your brain caught up. On the second night, we left a camera rolling while we slept. It was facing the dunes. In the morning, the memory card was blank. Not corrupted, not full, just empty. Wes swore he checked it. Cam didn't say anything. He'd pace through the night, mumbling something over and over in his sleep. I heard the words, "He already knows. Juno tried calling her mom that morning." Someone answered same ringtone, same number, but the voice just kept repeating her name like it was practicing how to say it. We panicked, packed up and drove back toward town. The road looked the same but felt unfamiliar. The gas station had a rotary dial pump. The guy at the counter had a cracked name tag that said Ray. When I asked how long he'd been open, he said, "Since before the bombs." I asked which bombs. He said the first ones. We got back to the dunes around sunset. Our old footprints were still there, perfectly preserved. Cam was gone the next morning. His sleeping bag, zipped boots untouched. Phone beside him with an alarm set for 3:33 a.m. It never went off. Wes screamed into the dunes until his throat gave out. Juno didn't speak. I tried to call the ranger station. My phone had no contacts, just one number in the recent log. 3:33 a.m. We found Cam's tracks circling a dune 6 times and then stopping. No other prints, no sign of a struggle, just a broken loop of someone being imitated by something that didn't know how to finish. That night, Juno stood up at exactly 3:30 a.m. She looked at me and whispered, "I know what's behind me now." She turned, smiled, and vanished. No flash, no sound, just gone. Wes and I sat in silence until sunrise. We left together but never spoke again. The GPS kept spinning. Compass refused to steady. When we reached town, we'd missed the return date by 3 days. Cam's family filed a report. Juno's parents blocked my number. Wes refused to sleep for a week. He sent me one final text. It was a video clip. The dunes panning slowly. In the center stood the figure. Pale, blindfolded, still pointing. I asked where he filmed it. He said he didn't. It was in a folder called Ghost Terrain, but we never uploaded anything. He stopped answering after that. I went back alone. I had to know the ranger I spoke to had no official record of anything strange, but he looked tired, older than his age. He said people sometimes reported odd dreams, lost time, repeating paths, but nothing confirmed. I hiked to the same spot. It was unchanged, still waiting. I heard Juno laugh, faint and distant like a memory not quite dead. I followed the sound for hours. The sun never moved. I reached a place where even the wind held its breath. Then I saw him again. Closer. No longer pointing. Just waiting. I didn't approach. I turned away. And for just a second I saw what was behind me. I won't tell you what it was. Some things aren't meant to be put into words. But I will say this. If you ever camp in White Sands and hear your name whispered on windless air, don't look. If your group shares dreams, don't assume it's coincidence. If the clocks reset, leave. If you wake at 3:33 a.m. and feel watched, don't open your eyes. And if you already did all that and nothing strange happened good, that means they didn't choose you. But if you came back changed and no one believes you, you're not alone. Some landscapes don't need monsters to be terrifying. Sometimes the land itself is the memory, and you're just what it's trying to remember or forget. Story 3, Echoes in the Maze, of Bryce Canyon. I don't know exactly when the voices stopped being echoes and started being memories, but I know they never match my own. Bryce Canyon isn't really a canyon, not in the way people think. It's more like a bowl full of stone spires and strange light, a place where sound goes to get reshaped before coming back to you with a hint of something missing. My name is Noah, and I came to Bryce with Aaron to take our engagement photos. Something she insisted on because she'd seen a post about the hoodoos at sunrise. Said it looked like Mars. If Mars had been carved by dreams, I didn't argue. I loved her, even if we'd been different lately. Even if she seemed to forget things we both remembered clearly. Even if I sometimes caught myself thinking we were pretending to still be the couple we once were. The first strange thing happened in Wall Street Canyon where the rock closes in and turns the sun into a memory. We heard someone laughing ahead of us. A man's laugh, followed by Aaron's voice. It was her tone, exactly her rhythm, but the words were off. She said, "He still doesn't know what he did," and then silence. I looked at her. She looked at me. I asked if she'd said anything. She hadn't. I believed her mostly. That night we stayed at a lodge just outside the park. I replayed the clip we'd taken on her phone, just wind and dust and the rustling of boots on gravel. But I kept thinking about that line. He still doesn't know what he did. I didn't sleep well. In the morning, Aaron was already packed outside, staring at the cliffs like they were whispering to her. She smiled when I walked out, but it didn't reach her eyes. She said she wanted to hike the Queen's Garden Trail. Said she had dreamt about it, that the path was familiar. We hadn't been there before, not in this life. I told myself that was just a phrase. We started hiking. It was beautiful too, beautiful like a painting trying to distract you from the frame. About halfway in, we heard it again. Voices ours, but not repeating anything, we said. This time, my echo said, maybe if I forget first, it won't hurt as much. I stopped. Erin kept walking. I asked if she heard it. She said yes, but she didn't want to talk about it. We kept hearing more, the deeper we went. They always came a few seconds after we spoke, but the words were never the same. Sometimes it was intimate, like whispers from a life we'd lived, but buried. Other times it was cruel. Once it said, "You always leave when it gets real," and that felt like something I'd said in anger, but never out loud. I started filming, recording audio, trying to prove we weren't losing our minds. Erin asked me to stop. She said it didn't matter. Said maybe this place was giving us a chance to listen to what we'd ignored. I asked what that meant. She didn't answer, just kept walking toward the Navajo Loop. By the third day, we were barely speaking. She took longer showers. I stayed outside, staring into the canyon, trying to understand why the light looked different each hour, but always wrong, like it came from two suns at once. On our last hike, we followed a trail that wasn't on the map. It had no name, just a symbol carved into a wooden post, an ear with a spiral inside it. The air was colder, thinner, but it wasn't elevation. It felt like stepping into a place that didn't want to be perceived. The rocks had carvings, not petroglyphs. More like names, hundreds of them scratched over each other in layers so thick they blurred into meaningless marks. I found one that looked like Erin's name. She found one that looked like mine. She said, maybe we'd been here before. Maybe this was where we ended and started again. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. There was something about the way she said it. That night she asked if I remembered the accident. I said, what accident? She just stared at me. Said maybe that's why I didn't hear the echoes clearly. Maybe denial blocks the signal. I got angry. Said this wasn't therapy. Said maybe she was projecting. She didn't speak again that night. In the morning, I woke up alone. Her phone was still charging. Her pack still at the door. I went back into the canyon alone. I shouted her name until my voice broke. Every echo answered me, but none of them said her name the same way. One of them sounded like me, but younger. Another sounded like my father. One said I warned you in a tone that made my skin crawl. I stayed out there for 9 hours. Never saw her. Rangers helped me file a report. They asked if we'd argued. I said no. I lied. They asked if she'd ever mentioned wanting to disappear. I said no. I told the truth. Weeks passed. They never found her. Her parents blamed me softly in the way people do when they're too tired to scream. I stopped sleeping. I kept hearing the echoes, even in my apartment, even in my dreams. They said things I'd never said, but always knew. I went back a year later, same week, same trail, alone. The spiral symbol was gone. The post had been replaced, but I found it anyway. The hidden trail. The names in the stone mine was clearer this time. I heard her voice just ahead of me. She said, "He finally hears it." I didn't follow. I turned back. This time I brought a mirror. I held it up to the canyon wall. Nothing behind me. Nothing in the reflection. But the sound came anyway. This time the voice was calm. It said, "You can't unhear what the canyon remembers." I nodded, said nothing, and walked out. If you ever visit Bryce and the echoes don't line up with your voice, don't follow them. If you hear your name said with just the wrong inflection, turn around, don't keep walking. Some trails loop back, not because they were designed that way, but because some mistakes don't want to be forgotten. They want to be walked again and again, until you finally hear what you refuse to say. And if you're lucky, maybe that's where it ends. Or maybe that's where it begins. Again. Story 4. The Ferry That Never Returned. I don't remember boarding the ferry. I remember the dock, the early morning fog, the chill in my bones that had nothing to do with the weather, but not the moment I stepped on. I was just there, standing near the railing, watching the lake stretch out in both directions like a silver ribbon that refused to end. My name's Marcus, or at least that's what the crew called me. I didn't give them my name. I don't remember talking to anyone before they said it. They all seemed to know me in the way. Small towns know faces but not stories. The ferry was old, more worn than the pictures on the Chelan tourism site. It smelled like damp rope and oil, the kind of scent that clings to things too long in motion to rest. The sky was gray and the water was quieter than it should have been. No waves, no breeze, just that hum low and steady of an engine that felt like it had been running for years without pause. There were others on board, maybe 8 or 9, spread out, quiet. Most of them stared straight ahead like they were waiting for something to come into view. Only one caught my eye. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on a bench by herself with a red coat and a yellow hair clip shaped like a star. She didn't smile, didn't fidget, just looked at me and asked, "Are we almost there?" I told her I didn't know where we were going. She nodded, like that was the right answer. The ferry kept moving. The lake never changed. Hours passed. Maybe more. No phone signal, no GPS. The captain never made announcements. Just this slow drift forward through mist and silence. I tried to talk to a man leaning over the railing. He didn't respond, just kept whispering the same phrase over and over. I should have told her like he was stuck in a thought he couldn't escape. I sat down eventually. Tried to remember why I was here. My backpack was under the bench, inside a notepad with pages I didn't recognize, filled with drawings of this ferry, this lake, this sky. My handwriting, my initials. But none of the drawings looked like mine. The lines were too confident, the shading too precise. I asked another woman on board if she knew what time it was. She said, "Time doesn't mean much here." Then she turned away. The girl in red asked me again, "Are we almost there?" I told her I still didn't know. She frowned, said she thought we should have arrived by now, then added, "Maybe you're not ready yet." I laughed nervously, but she didn't. Her eyes were too serious, too knowing. Around what I assumed was midday, the boat turned. Not sharply, just a slow curve like it was retracing a path. I asked the captain if we were heading back. He smiled without warmth and said, "We're always heading somewhere." That night, or what felt like night, I dreamed of water swallowing me whole. But it wasn't violent. It was soft, like returning to something I saw faces below the surface. Faces I recognized but couldn't name. When I woke up, the boat hadn't moved. Or maybe it had, but the view was the same. No shoreline, no markers, just gray. One man disappeared, no splash, no sound. He was there one moment, then he wasn't. No one reacted, except the girl. She counted on her fingers, then whispered, "One less." I asked what she meant. She said, "Every loop there's fewer." I asked how many times she'd been here. She said she forgot. I stopped asking questions. Instead, I watched. Tried to track anything that might give away the truth. But the truth didn't feel like something to find. It felt like something I'd already forgotten. On what might have been the third day, the boat docked, briefly. A wooden landing rough and rotted led to a fog-covered forest. No signs, no people. One passenger got off, an old woman with no luggage. She walked slowly, turned once to look at us, then vanished into the trees. The boat pulled away without a sound. I wanted to follow. I didn't. That night the girl asked if I remembered. Yet I asked what she said. Why you came here. I told her I didn't choose this. She said, "Not recently, but once you did." The captain stood by the wheel, whistling a tune I almost recognized. A lullaby, maybe, or a hymn. Something from before, I looked through my notebook again. A final page had appeared. A sketch of me, eyes closed, lying on my side in a hospital bed, tubes monitors, a woman's hand holding mine. I dropped the book. The lake rippled for the first time. The girl stared at me and said, "Now you're getting close." I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. Inhale, exhale. The air was thicker now, warmer, like summer in the middle of winter. My memories came back in flashes. The accident, the impact, the weightlessness, the silence, the voices calling my name, the distant hum of machines. I wasn't on a ferry. Not really, I was in between. A waiting room dressed as water and wood and sky. And everyone on board was like me, adrift. Not dead, not alive, just somewhere else. The girl in red stood beside me, took my hand, asked again, "Are we almost there?" I looked at her and said, "Yes," and meant it. The boat turned again, this time sharper. Ahead, I saw light. Not sunlight, but something deeper. Warmer. It didn't blind. It welcomed. A few more passengers stepped off when we docked. I stayed behind. Not because I was afraid, but because something in me wasn't finished. The girl nodded like she understood that it's okay. "You'll know when it's time," I asked her how she knew. She said, "I've been everyone once." Then she was gone too. Now I sit here, still on the ferry. Fewer people each day. Same questions. Same lake. I talk to new passengers. Some don't respond, some do. I try to help them remember. Try to get them ready. Not because I have to, but because someone did that for me. If you ever find yourself on a boat with no name drifting through fog, with no horizon, ask yourself what you left undone. What goodbye you never said. What truth you tried to outrun. The ferry doesn't force you to leave. It waits. Patiently, until you do. And if you hear a little girl in a red coat ask, "Are we almost there?" don't lie. Just tell her the truth. You're closer than you think. Story 5. The Last Night. In Ocala Forest. I knew something was wrong when I couldn't remember who told the story first. There were 5 of us camped deep inside Ocala National Forest, and I swear the first night felt like a regular trip. The kind you take in your 20s to prove you're still wild, still brave, still unbroken by routines and deadlines and phones. We brought tents and beer and music and even one of those little solar panels for charging devices, though. By the second night, none of us touched our phones. Not because we agreed to unplug, but because we kept forgetting we had them. That should have been the first sign. I remember the names in pieces. I'm Riley. Then there was Dean, who drove Lex and Jules, who were always some form of in love or fighting, and Tanner, who tagged along because he hated being alone on weekends. We hiked in 2 miles off the main trail and found a clearing someone had used before. There was a fire ring and sticks stacked nearby and a rope still dangling from a branch like someone had once tried to hang a bear bag, but gave up halfway. That first night we drank, told ghost stories, and listened to Dean explain how the stars looked wrong compared to what his app showed him last month in North Carolina. We made fun of him. Said maybe Florida had different constellations. He didn't laugh. The next morning, Jules asked who told the story about the woman with no face. No one remembered. She said it was me. I said I'd never heard it before. Dean said he had a dream about her. Lex said he saw her standing behind the tent. We all laughed. But that night, none of us wanted to sit with our backs to the trees. The forest sounded off. Too quiet between the insect buzzes. Too still when the wind should have moved. The third night, I caught myself calling Tanner by the wrong name. I said, "Trevor," he corrected me. Then 5 minutes later, Lex called him Thomas. We thought it was a joke. Then Jules looked at him and said, "What's your name again?" "Seriously?" He stared at her and said, "I don't know." He laughed after, but it didn't sound right. That night I dreamed I was walking in the woods alone. Only I wasn't me. I was looking at myself from outside my body, following a version of me that didn't blink, didn't breathe, just kept walking deeper into the trees. I woke up sweating, but no one else had slept either. Tanner said he didn't remember pitching his tent, but it was up and zipped, and his stuff was inside. Dean asked why Jules kept repeating the same story 3 times. Jules said she hadn't spoken all morning. We started getting short with each other, irritated. Everyone seemed a little off, like the version of themselves I knew had been softened, warped, rearranged. We stopped using names, started using you instead. Hey, you passed that. Don't go alone. Stick close. Like names were dangerous somehow. On the 4th night, we sat around the fire in silence. No one told stories, no one drank. The fire crackled, and we all watched it like it might speak. At some point, Jules leaned toward me and asked if I remembered how we got here. I said, "Dean drove." She said no. How we got here to this moment, this exact second, I didn't understand. She started crying, then stopped, suddenly then laughed. Lex said, "Maybe we should leave in the morning." Dean agreed, but I wasn't sure who Dean was anymore. He looked like Dean mostly, but his voice had started to shift, just enough to make my skin feel wrong when he talked. On the 5th day we packed up, or tried to. Half our stuff was missing. My boots were someone else's size. Lex's backpack had 2 toothbrushes and no food. Jules had a jacket none of us recognized. Dean found a mirror in his tent, just a small circular one cracked down the center. He said it wasn't his. I looked into it. My reflection blinked slower than me. We left anyway. Tried to follow the GPS, but the signal looped. The trail signs didn't match the map. We hiked in a circle twice. The second time Jules wasn't with us. We called for her. Dean said he saw her walking ahead. I said she'd been behind me. Then Tanner screamed. He said he saw 2 of her. One walked left, one walked right. We ran until we couldn't. When we stopped, we weren't sure who we'd lost. Lex sat down and started writing on his arm with a pen. A list. Names is mine. The others. But he scratched one out. Then another. He said none of them sounded real. We argued about which way was out. Then we stopped arguing because none of us were sure how long we'd been out there. The sun never felt like it moved. The light shifted, but not in a normal way. More like a flicker, like a projector bulb struggling to stay on. I started to forget my voice. I tried saying my name and it came out wrong, like a borrowed accent. That night we built a fire without speaking. We sat around it, 4 of us, but I couldn't remember who was missing, or if someone had ever been missing. Lex leaned toward me and whispered, "I don't think I was ever real." I told him not to joke. He didn't blink, just said, "It's easier if you forget first." I went to sleep cold and woke up warm, alone. No fire, no tents, no footprints, just trees. And the sound of something breathing that wasn't mine. I walked until I found the clearing again, different but familiar. There were sticks in a pile, a rope in a tree, a half-buried beer can with a date from a year in the future. I sat down and tried to think, tried to remember who I came with. Names floated in my mind but didn't stick. I opened my phone. No signal, no photos, just one note file. It said, "If you're reading this, they've already started replacing you. Don't trust the ones who don't blink. Don't answer to a name you don't remember choosing. Don't stay past the 5th night." It wasn't signed, but the font looked like mine. The note was last edited 5 days ago. I still don't know which night this is, but I can hear someone calling my name in the trees. except it's not the name I remember. It's the one I started answering to without realizing. So if you ever go camping with friends and you all start forgetting little things, don't stay quiet, don't brush it off. If you can't remember who started the story or who's missing from the group, leave immediately. Because the forest has its own way of balancing, of absorbing, of copying. And once it figures out the version of you that fits best, the rest gets stripped away until even your reflection doesn't flinch when you do. Story 6. The Camp Counselor's Cabin. I never planned to go back to Camp Stone Hollow, but grief has a strange way of twisting your sense of distance and time until you find yourself standing in places you swore you would never see again, even if it means facing what you left behind in the dark. I was 29 when I returned to the Catskills, the sky colder than I remembered, and the trees thinner than the ones that loomed over me when I first came here as a teenager to work as a camp counselor. Back then, I thought this place was magical. A place where kids made lifelong friends and learned how to be brave. But that summer ended with a funeral, and the kind of silence that follows people into adulthood and festers beneath their smiles. They shut the camp down the week after it happened, and no one ever said anything out loud. Not about the accident, not about the lake, not about the boy who never came back from swimming practice. I told myself it wasn't my fault that I had only looked away for a second, that the other counselors were just as responsible. But I was the one who made the call to let them swim that late. I was the one who thought the storm would pass. I was the one who saw his face last, and then nothing. The camp remained abandoned for a decade until someone bought the land and started renovations, turning it into a retreat for artists and writers. They kept the name, though. Stone Hollow. They said it honored the past, but they didn't know what the past still held. I received an invitation in the mail. No return address, no sender, just a simple cream envelope with my name printed in bold serif font. The note inside said, "Come home, it's not finished." The handwriting was mine. I arrived just after sunset, and the gravel path crunched beneath my tires like it recognized me. The cabins were still there, though repainted and cleaned. The dining hall roof had been redone, and the docks had been rebuilt, but the lake was the same. It always was glassy and cold and too quiet for comfort. I checked into my assigned cabin number 11, the same one I stayed in that summer. The air inside smelled of cedar and dust and something faintly metallic like dried blood that had been scrubbed but never forgotten. I unpacked, slowly half expecting someone to stop me, but no one did. The place was nearly empty. I met only one other guest, a woman named Claire, who said she was here to write poetry about loss. She didn't ask me why I came, and I didn't ask her anything in return. That night I walked the grounds alone. The trees rustled just enough to sound like footsteps always a few paces behind me. The wind carried laughter that wasn't mine, and at one point I saw a flashlight flicker by the old mess hall. Even though no one was scheduled to be there, I didn't follow it. Not yet. I couldn't sleep. The bed felt too soft, the walls too thin, the silence too loud. Around 3 a.m., I heard water dripping not from the ceiling or the sink, but from under the bed. I got down on my knees and lifted the edge of the mattress and saw a puddle spreading across the wooden floor, cold and clear with no source. I wiped it up, but my fingers stung afterward like the water didn't want to be touched. The next day I tried to leave. The road was gone, not blocked, just gone, replaced by more trees, more gravel, more of the same. I walked a mile in each direction only to return to the same cabin each time. The GPS spun in circles. My phone refused to power on. Claire was gone. Her cabin empty, bed untouched, no luggage, no sign of struggle, just her notebook left open to a page that read, "He still calls your name." I went back to the lake at dusk. Something about the way the light hit the water made me think of him again. His name was Evan. He was 9. He liked to collect smooth rocks and line them up by color, and he always said goodnight to the stars before bed. He drowned on my watch. They never recovered his body. The lake never gave it back. I sat on the dock and waited. The sun dipped low and the fog began to rise, curling around the water like breath. Then I heard it splashing soft, like someone waited just beyond the reeds. I didn't move. The sound came closer. Then I saw the top of a head just barely breaking the surface, black hair clinging to a pale scalp unmoving. Then the eyes opened. I didn't scream. I just stood up and whispered, "I'm sorry." And the eyes blinked slowly as if to say, "I know." That night I dreamed of the cabin, but not from inside. I was outside looking in the window, watching myself sleep. Only it wasn't me, not anymore. The face was thinner, the eyes darker, and when I turned in bed, the figure at the window didn't. I woke to find the door open, the air colder than before, and a trail of wet footprints leading from the lake to my bedside. I followed them barefoot across the campgrounds, through the fog, into the woods, where the trees leaned inward like they were trying to listen. They led me to the old counselor's cabin, the one we used for staff meetings and emergency calls. It was supposed to be torn down years ago, but it stood untouched, covered in moss. The door opened on its own and I stepped inside. The lights flickered, then held steady. The room was filled with objects from that summer towels board, games, whistles, name tags, and a clipboard with my handwriting listing swim schedules. I looked at the bottom corner and saw a note added in different ink. "Evan wants to stay." I heard a splash behind me. I turned, but no one was there. The mirror above the desk was fogged, and someone had written a message across the glass. In reverse, "Don't leave again." I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was standing at the edge of the lake, the water perfectly still. My reflection looked like me, but didn't move with me. I stepped back. It stayed. I said his name, and the reflection smiled. The next morning I packed, but the bag wouldn't close. Every time I zipped it, something new appeared inside the red whistle. Evan used to wear a rock from his collection, a wet towel, a photo I didn't remember taking showing me, and him standing side by side at the edge of the dock, both of us smiling. Even though that moment never happened. I understood, then I hadn't come to say goodbye. I had come because he hadn't left. Not really, not entirely, and some part of me had stayed with him too frozen in that final second before the scream, before the silence, before the dark water claimed him. I went back to the cabin, left the door open, set the photo on the table and whispered, "You can rest now." The wind picked up, the trees leaned back, and for the first time since I returned, the lake rippled without sound. That night I slept, and when I woke, the sun was rising, the fog had lifted, the road was back. My phone buzzed with service. The notebook on my nightstand had one new line written in a different hand. "Thank you for not forgetting." I drove away without looking in the rear-view mirror. Some places are meant to hold pieces of us, not to punish, but to remind that grief is not a chain, but a weight, and if carried honestly, it can teach us how to keep walking. If you ever lose someone and the world tells you to move on too quickly, remember this. It's not about forgetting or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about returning when you're ready, listening, when the silence speaks, and leaving a light on for the ones who never found their way out. Story 7. The Whistler at Denali Pass. We should have turned back before the sun dropped, but pride is heavier than any pack, and we carried more than just gear when we ascended Denali Pass that day. My name is Owen, and this story isn't about a summit. It's about the part of the mountain no one puts in the brochures, The part the locals don't mention to outsiders. Not because it isn't real, but because saying its name is like letting it out. There were 4 of us experienced climbers roped together in layers of frost and bravado. Me, Lena, Marcus, and Kai. We weren't amateurs. We'd summited Rainier twice, spent 2 weeks in Patagonia, and we trained for this. We respected the climb. We studied the weather. We checked every knot and layer, and still, we missed the one sign we shouldn't have ignored. The wind died. Not slowly. Not like a change in pressure. 1 second it was howling through the pass, and the next complete silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes your pulse sound like it's echoing through a cave. Kai was the first to speak, barely above a whisper. He said, "Do you hear that?" We listened thinking, maybe avalanche, rumble, maybe creaking ice. But then it came again. A whistle. Not musical, not like someone calling for help. It was flat, mechanical, like air pushed through teeth. It started behind us, then ahead, then to the side. We turned in slow circles, goggles fogging, and the sound moved like it had mass, like it was scouting us. Lena said it was probably just the wind, but her voice was shaking. Marcus looked pale, even beneath his scarf. He said, "I heard about this," and we all stared. He said there was a story about the Whistler, something climbers talked about in bars, but never on mountains. A presence that moved with the ice, a mimic that called to you, never speaking, only repeating back what it had heard. I laughed short and sharp, said we were just tired, altitude, playing tricks. But my hands were sweating inside 2 layers of gloves, and I couldn't explain why I suddenly felt watched. We pushed forward slower now. The trail got narrow, and the snow crusted over with patches of black ice. The sun dipped behind the ridgeline, and the shadows changed. Not longer. Just wrong. Our radios began to static, even though the batteries were fresh. Then Lena slipped. Just a small slide, but enough to pull the rope taut and send the rest of us scrambling for footing. We steadied, pulled her back, and she stood, shaking, eyes wide. She said she heard someone whisper her name as she fell. I said it must have been wind again. I kept saying that, like it would become true if I repeated it enough. That night we made camp near a rocky outcrop, shielded from the worst of the cold. The stars came out, but felt distant, like watching memories from someone else's life. We ate in silence, all of us listening for that whistle. It didn't come. Not then. But when I unzipped my tent sometime past midnight, I saw boot prints circling the camp. Not from one of us. Too large, too spaced. I followed them for a few feet, then they stopped. No turnaround, no retreat, just vanished. When I came back, Kai was gone. His sleeping bag was still zipped, his boots still inside his ice axe beside his pack. No sign of struggle, no note, just the empty place where he should have been. We called his name until our throats were raw. No answer, just that whistle, faint and constant somewhere beyond the ridge. Lena wanted to go back. Marcus wanted to press forward, said if we summited, we'd get airlifted out faster. I stayed quiet. I kept hearing Kai say my name over and over, but not the way he usually did. Too slow, too careful, like someone trying out a new word. We moved again at dawn. The wind returned, but it felt wrong, like something pretending to be wind. Our footsteps sounded too loud. Our shadows didn't quite match our movements. Marcus stopped mid-climb and said, "We were 4. I said, "Yes, now 3. He shook his head and said, "No, before that, we were 5. I didn't answer. I didn't remember a 5th. But when I looked down the trail, there were 5 sets of boot prints. 2 of them side by side, like someone walking beside me all along. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. That night, the Whistler came closer. We didn't see him, but the sound was everywhere, bouncing off the ice like sonar. Always a few feet away, Marcus started talking in his sleep, not mumbling full sentences. He said, "I never meant to leave you. I thought you'd catch up." Lena recorded it on her phone, played it back. On the recording, he never spoke, just that whistle rising and falling like breath. On the final night, we made it to high camp, 2 tents. Bitter cold, thinner air than any of us liked. Marcus didn't eat, just sat staring into the dark like he saw something none of us could. I asked what he was thinking. He said, "You hear the voice too, don't you?" I nodded. He said, "It's using his voice now, the one we lost. But it's not him, it just learned how to sound like us." That night, he vanished too. I woke to find his gear untouched. His name written in frost on the inside of my tent, not etched formed. Like the condensation obeyed a will, not our own. Lana and I didn't speak. We packed in silence and descended before sunrise. But the trail had changed. Switchbacks. We didn't remember. Crampon marks we hadn't made. The ice held patterns like handwriting, just vague enough to question, just sharp enough to fear. Halfway down, Lena slipped again. I reached for her and caught nothing. Just air. Her scream echoed, once then turned into laughter. Not hers. His Kai's voice, but warped like memory filtered through frost. I didn't go after her. I couldn't. I finished the descent alone. Park rangers found me a day later, dehydrated and shaken, muttering about the wind, not being wind. They took my report, nodded slowly, said, "I wasn't the first to come down. Confused missing teammates hearing things that shouldn't echo. They never put that in the brochures. They never warn you about the things that listen when you speak your own name aloud. Too often, I still hear the whistle, sometimes especially when I'm near snow or standing in silence long enough for the wind to catch its breath. It mimics things. It learns and it remembers. If you ever hike Denali and the wind suddenly stops, if you hear a sound that repeats your words but not quite right, don't follow it. Don't reply. Don't ask who's there. Some voices were never meant to be answered, and some mountains aren't climbed. They consume. I don't know if the others are gone. Not really. Maybe they followed the voice too far and forgot which one was theirs. Maybe they're still up there, walking beside new climbers, whispering warnings that no one believes until it's too late. If you go and return, speak their names out loud just once. Not to summon them, but to remind yourself who you are before the mountain teaches you to forget. Story 8. Where the Pines Divide. They say the pines grow differently in the Black Hills, too tightly together in some places, and unnaturally spread apart in others. Like the land can't decide whether it wants to keep secrets or show its scars. My name is Daniel, and I didn't come to South Dakota to chase ghost stories or urban legends. I came because my grandfather left me something in his will. Something that didn't make sense on paper, a plot of forested land he refused to talk about while he was alive. The letter attached to the deed was short, barely legible, written in his old shaking hand. It said, "If you ever hear her voice, do not answer. If you see her smile, close your eyes. And if you reach the place where the pines divide, turn around." That was all. No context, no explanation. My parents said he had been different after the war, that some parts of his childhood out west never quite left him. But when I drove into the Black Hills and stood on the edge of the property, I felt something cold coil in my chest, like I had just walked into a memory I hadn't lived yet. The trees were tall, older than they should have been, and they swayed in a rhythm that didn't match the wind. There was a trail barely there, more suggestion than path, but my feet followed it like they'd done it before I told myself I'd only stay one night, just enough to say I checked it out. But by the time I set up my tent, the forest had already changed. The sun took too long to set, or maybe it dipped early. I lost track. My phone had no service. The GPS spun like it was dizzy. I lit a fire and tried to read, but the woods made it hard to concentrate. Every few minutes, a twig snapped too close or the air shifted like someone had just walked by. Then I heard her for the first time. A woman humming soft and slow, the kind of tune you don't recognize but feel like you've known since birth. I stood up, turned in place, the sound always just behind me. I called out, said hello, then remembered the letter. Do not answer. Too late. The humming stopped. The fire flared, then settled. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the largest tree I could find and kept my flashlight on even when the batteries dipped into red. Around 3 a.m, I saw a light move between the trees. Not a flashlight, not fire, more like a lantern with no source. I didn't follow it. Not then. The next morning I found footprints near my tent, barefoot, small and deep, like whoever left them had been standing still for a long time. I hiked deeper into the property, trying to see where the land ended. It didn't. The compass kept turning. At one point, I passed the same rock formation 3 times, even though I had walked in a straight line. When I stopped to rest, I noticed the trees were parting ahead, a narrow clearing where the pines bent outward in opposite directions, like a path had been carved by something that didn't care for symmetry. Where the pines divide. My pulse kicked up. I remembered the letter I turned back, or tried to. The path behind me looked the same as the one ahead. I picked a direction and walked. The sun didn't move. Hours passed. The shadows stayed the same. I came to a small cabin unmarked, half swallowed by moss and earth. No windows, one door slightly ajar. I told myself not to go inside. I went anyway. The interior was colder than outside, and it smelled like rust and lavender. There was a bed, a table and a mirror above a sink. The glass too clean for a place so forgotten. On the wall above the bed was a photo, black and white, of a young girl with long hair and a wide grin standing in front of the same cabin. Her eyes had been scratched out. I turned to leave and heard a voice behind me. A whisper. My name. I spun. No one. But in the mirror, the girl stood behind me, smiling. I blinked. She was gone. I ran back into the trees. The light had changed the air heavier, the ground soft like it had been rained on, even though the sky was clear. I found my way back to the camp, but everything had shifted. My tent was collapsed, my gear soaked, my footprints gone. That night she came closer. I heard her walking 1 footstep at a time, circling the clearing. She sang the same tune, low and slow, and then she spoke. She said I waited. She said you came late. I covered my ears. She laughed, not cruel, not angry, just disappointed. I fell asleep against the tree, and in my dream I saw my grandfather as a boy running through these woods, barefoot, breathless. He reached the dividing pines and stopped. Behind him, the girl called his name. He turned, smiled, and then the dream ended. I woke with my name carved into the bark beside my head. Not written. Carved. Fresh bleeding sap. I packed, I ran, but the forest didn't let me leave. I passed the cabin again, 3 times. On the 4th, the door was gone. Only the photo remained. Now burned to the edges, I screamed for her to stop. The woods went still. Then she whispered, "You called me, so I stayed." I dropped to my knees, said I was sorry, said I didn't know. The air warmed, the sky lightened, the trail reappeared. When I looked back, the clearing was gone, just trees. Ordinary still, I found my car where I left it. Engine cold, keys on the dash. I drove until I saw people again. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. But when I got home, I found a box on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was the photo, untouched, unsinged. Her eyes whole this time, and beside it a note in my grandfather's hand. You turned back. I never did. Thank you. If you ever inherit land in the Black Hills and the pines pull away from each other like curtains, remember this. Not every path is meant to be walked. Not every voice wants to be found. And sometimes what calls to us from the dark is not lost, but waiting to be remembered. Do not answer. Do not smile back. And if you already have, then you know she is smiling still. So what do you think? Are the woods really empty when no one's around, or are they just quieter than we'd like to believe? Tonight, we walk trails where time bends, where memory distorts, where silence isn't safety, it's a warning. From Denali to the Catskills, these places held more than scenery. They held people's last thoughts, last choices, and sometimes second chances. Maybe you felt something in one of them. Maybe a whisper sounded familiar, or a face reminded you of someone you lost. That's the thing about wilderness horror. It doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it comes from within, but these stories weren't just about fear. They were about truth. The kind we hide. The kind that returns. The forest doesn't forget. The lake doesn't lie. And the path always knows when you've been here before. Sleep well tonight if you can. The wilderness is quiet now, but quiet doesn't always mean alone.